So this is our thoughts on our conversation with Ron Kauk, the Rites of Passage. As we said in the podcast, we first met Ron on our very first trip to Yosemite when we were putting together issue 1 of weMove, and it was a chance meeting with Ron as he was giving his, I think it's quite a regular lecture slideshow, as many climbers seem to do in Yosemite Valley as part of the national park kind of weekly program. And everything that he was saying was really resonant with what we were talking about at the time. So this was 3 years ago. We were questing into this unknown world of let's put a magazine together, let's start the weMove journey, and hearing him talk about climbing and what it gave to him and that idea of adventure and really trusting yourself and having a connection with others and the environment that you're in to really make the most of it. And we met him afterwards and we said, can we go for a coffee with you? He didn't know us from Adam, and we hung out a couple of times with him.
Over the period of 3 days, we hung out with him every day for 3 days, didn't we? Not the entire day, but probably like a couple of hours every day. And
he was quite mythical.
Yeah.
Like he'd just say, we'll meet you by the tree, by the bridge. And you're like, okay, who does this? And it was almost, well, I kind of wanted him to be a bear that just morphed into Ron.
Probably is.
And he probably is. And we had these great conversations, like nothing really about climbing per se, but everything about climbing and what it's taught him and what it teaches.
There were conversations without a desired outcome. They weren't really questions. They were just flowing conversations that meandered and allowed themselves to emerge into whatever they needed to be. It's the best way to describe, I think, the way that Ron talks.
Yeah.
And that's how spending time in that conversation is how all the reflection and wisdom comes out. You know, in my experience, in the experience of being with Ron twice now, you have very long conversations for
hours.
Like up to 6 hours we've had, and backwards and forwards, and different opinions are put forth, and no one's trying to dominate the conversation. No one is saying this is how it is. There's lots of putting ideas forward and letting them merge and come together.
It's like an exploration and see where it can go, and bringing everyone's ideas to the table.
It's the art of conversation, I would say.
Yeah.
Because you very rarely sit down with anyone for 6 hours. You might go and see a friend, but you very rarely sit down with them and talk intentionally for 6 hours.
You rarely talk with people.
Yeah.
Really, really actually.
A lot of time is spent doing stuff, isn't it? Let's go grab a tea. Let's walk to here. So your conversation is never allowed to just develop into, a long format. But with Ron, that is the format. That I can't imagine any other type of conversation with Ron. But I think that's also a product, or that's also reflective of the environment in which Ron lives in, and how he spent the past 40 years of his life. He talked about being a teenager, and they would climb and they would come back, and he would spend time in Camp 4 talking with each other, and there was a campfire, and obviously no technology at that time. So really the only things to do were climb and talk at that period of time.
I'd have loved to have met him at 15, because I have a feeling that he would have been very similar to how he is now. Quite thoughtful and contemplative.
Yeah. I would assume. Yeah, I would make the same guess.
And had a real ability, clearly a physical ability. And just imagine him then meeting who became his peers, how their different dynamics would have played out. And
it was
Ron's not a man for bravado.
Yeah, I was just about to say the people that he would have hung out with, and Camp 4 was the perfect environment for him to thrive in. It allowed his reflective mind time, his that element of him, but also the men around him and the women around him doing the climbing feats that they did. I mean, he mentioned that 15 years of age, 100 pull-ups a day. But he was in the environment where everyone was doing that, so of course you would do that.
Yeah.
If you maybe left to your own devices, you wouldn't, but in Camp 4 you're clearly going to do that again when there was very little around that period of time. There would have been guitars, board games,
some
beers,
chessboards,
and the conversations.
Probably not too many beers either.
And of course after 6, it'd have been dark. So what are you going to do other than talk?
Yeah, no head torches.
And also the environment. He mentioned the wider environment, the messages that were being given to people his age. He talked about the lyrics of Hendrix and the lyrics of the Rolling Stones. He talked about the catalogs and the magazines. They were really thought-provoking quotes to really make you reflective, and they were there to kind of open your mind.
Yeah.
Modern culture is not really like that because it's not safe and it's not sellable per se. So that was an extension of his environment even more so.
Yeah, they were very...
Sounds like beautiful times.
Oh, it'd have been amazing. I think the rate of development, and I think I've heard him say this during the podcast, like that rate of development in that era, kind of we won't have again. Like is the improvement in climbing and technical developments are going up fractions, whereas he was almost... Well, he was the past, present, and the future, and it was... You can't imagine climbing and experiencing the world the way they did at the time.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine like a graph, like a time and time on one axis and the rate of skill on another axis, and that period of time that he was alive must have had the steepest curve. Yeah. He says, there's not really anything left for people to do. Or, of course, there is, but, not a huge amount. So, Alex Honnold's just free soloed our cap. What else is there to do in Yosemite now? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking it.
Free solo the Dawn Wall.
Yeah. But, at that time, they were putting up first ascents on everything.
Yeah. Across the grades, across just a much simpler time.
Yeah. But also, he said that they were allowed the time to do it. He talked about, was it Astroman, I think, that he talked about, where it was... I may mess up here with the grades, but I think he talked about they had trained all summer. They were on 510s. Then when he got to Astroman, he did it on first sight, first try. Like he was perfectly in tune with being able to climb, that he was able to do the next grade up, no problems. That's just inconceivable now that you wouldn't just go and try that immediately or very quickly. That you know.
Yeah, I think people. Well, this takes us straight into Rites of Passage.
Yeah,
because that was very much you pay your dues, you go through, you learn from others, and now it's about almost like a celebrity culture. I want to do that route, or I want to do that thing.
Skipping the steps.
So you go, well, I've trained. It's quite interesting. There are people from the UK that are going to be, they've never really climbed before, and they're going to climb El Cap. And it's almost like this thing to do.
It's robbing yourself of so much of the process.
Quite possibly. Also going on these wild, crazy adventures.
Yeah.
To put, in like a real... Maybe that's the way to do it. You have to have no experience of something and go into it now, as opposed to, in those days, things hadn't been climbed. So there were new ascents, first routes going up regularly. Whereas now, that level's just pushed so much, with Alex freestyling.
It's the opposite side of the spectrum, isn't it? It makes the opposite side of the spectrum more applicable.
So like Ross Edgley's doing amazing things. Yeah. Kind of going back to that original eccentric explorer. I'm going to do it to see if it's possible, see if I can do it.
Yeah.
As opposed to being, I'm the best out there, I'm going to go and have a go.
Yeah.
So it's a different
a lot of paradoxes in that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't really know. And I guess maybe you pay your dues. I know Ross Edgley has done a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Like
you don't just turn up to the starting line, do you?
No. But even then, maybe climbing, I think you said about how climbing's the practice out of all of, yoga, CrossFit, whatever, that you're both in touch with your body, nature, kind of you are fully connected to everything.
Yeah.
And anything else kind of takes you out, like you're dealing with your emotions, you're interacting with the natural environment. That is, if you climb outside, indoor climbing's kind of can become a mindless pursuit of.
Yeah, I guess the other one is surfing. Like we heard Johnny Paskowitz talk about that. Like you have to be in tune with nature.
Yeah.
And Ron talks about with Sacred Rock, it's like they bring the young offenders to Yosemite to build a connection and develop a relationship with nature, and as a result develop and build a relationship with themselves.
Yeah.
It allows that process to happen. It doesn't, the rock, nature, doesn't give you an opinion back. It doesn't, you can either connect with it or you can't. You can either climb the route or you can't. It's non, it's not like you're trying, there's not an ego pursuit to like, can I get my leg in this position, or, can I take that opponent out? It's purely mirroring where you're at.
Well, I think all practices mirror where you're at. Like you can try with climbing, I'm going to do this, and bludgeon your way through it and come off a bit worse, bloody knuckles. I saw an interview with Alex Honnold, and it was on GQ, and he was talking about all the films that have used climbing in, and he was just kind of chuckling to himself as Sylvester Stallone was punching his way through climbing an ice waterfall by punching his hands through it, and he was like, there were kind of no scars on Alex's hands. That's because he's so accomplished at doing it.
Yeah, the bloody knuckles represent that you're actually just a bad climber, right?
As opposed to an accomplished climber.
Yeah.
And I think everything is a mirror, just where we're accepting where we are.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like the challenge, and maybe you did more then. And there was a part that Ron talked about some climb and this kind of rites of passage, and he was saying, this guy came back and said, so and so's done it, and he was like, whoa, if he's done it, I'm not ready to do that yet.
Yeah.
So you had this natural, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go and do it because that guy's done it. He was like, okay, cool, I'm developing.
Yeah.
And he's the marker to my progress.
Yeah.
And we've lost sight of that,
I mean, I suppose the obvious
but it's
response
hard.
to that is it's an egotistical pursuit, isn't it?
Yeah.
If someone else can do it, I want to be able to do it.
And Ron seemed like he was in flow the whole time.
For his life.
But for his life, yeah. And so it goes back to Jamie's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
He'd gone through the ordinary stuff.
Yeah.
Quite extraordinary. He moved to the valley age 15 and all of this stuff. I mean, it's
quite interesting actually, or maybe quite telling that one of Jamie's heroes is Ron Kauk.
Yeah.
Of all the different climbers out there, that's the one that he mentioned.
I think it's also quite telling because Ron talks a lot about climbing brands, and I feel that's because he has his son Lonnie, who's an incredibly accomplished climber and snowboarder, like doing amazing things. All these brands are in the pursuit of selling this idea of this experience.
Yeah.
And he was very much the muse of prana, which very much was about kind of Ron's approach on life.
Yeah.
And prana is sort of one of the yoga climbing brands.
Yeah.
And how you get that kind of crossover. And all the other brands are about, who can go fastest, who can go furthest, who can have that competition, that ego-driven competition, because it's not about who can go the fastest. At the top level it is, but they're all in flow. The people that aren't in flow fall off.
Well, this is where, for me, with Ron, it's like climbing for him was just each new route was a way to teach himself the next level of things about himself. It's all really, my interpretation of it is it's really all about knowing thyself. And he used each new climb or each new achievement on the rock to learn something new about himself. And that's where he talked about taking these long periods of time for reflection post each climb. He said about you reflecting on it and then bringing it back and passing it on and sharing it. Like, what have you learned that you can then, what have you learned about yourself and about the climb and about the world that you can then bring back and pass on? And so few people are doing that now, or it certainly seems to be so few people are doing that now, because the pursuit isn't about knowing thyself. The pursuit is about the next big thing, you know, the easy target is to say, you know, more likes or more money, more sponsorship. And actually Ron talked about that with Magic Line. You know, that was his, if I'm right, that was his last big
big route.
And he talked about having awareness of why was he doing it, because originally he started to think about it with regards to his sponsorships. Like he needed something new to sell to his sponsors, and then he was able to let go of that and move through it and you know, and get back to the original purpose of it. Yeah, of learning the next through reflection, through the experience, through reflection, coming out of it wisdom. That's the trivium. That's what it is. It's knowledge plus experience is wisdom.
So that's life. That's life answered. In that simple equation.
Well, it's a way to, you know, it's sort of as a way to think and a way to learn. There's an intention to it rather than merely having these experiences and not really considering what's going on. It's an input processing and output. There becomes a purpose to why you're doing them, in order to grow.
I wonder what effect free solo will have on people. Because Ron talked about, and we've heard it a few times, like living vicariously through, like stop watching YouTube, go out and live, as opposed to watching people do these incredible things, you know. And Tony Molina talked about it. Jamie Wheel talked about it. Ron was talking about it. And what effect free solo will have, because that's maybe everything. I was thinking about this the other day, talking to Jess. And like, everything is therapy in a way. And also everything is reflection. Like you can watch free solo and it's amazing, and it's like, what do you take away from it and apply to your life? But maybe you need the experiences. Service, what did you say? Knowledge,
experience.
Yeah. You can watch it.
The knowledge of it, the experience of it, the reflection of it becomes the wisdom.
Yeah, so you can watch free solo, but most people have never put themselves in a position to achieve what they really want to go and do. So you're then looking at it almost as a way of like, oh, he can do it and I can't. And I've seen lots of Instagram comments going, most inspiring film I've ever watched it many times. I think a few people have watched it like 6 or 7 times, and I'd be really interested to know what they're then, and I haven't seen it, but what they're doing with it. Yes. What they're doing with that level of inspiration, because one man has put that inspiration out there, and at any moment during the making of that film, he could have died.
Yeah, you know what pops into my head is we spoke with Logan, we spoke with Arthur, and they both talked about excellence versus perfection. You know, in pursuit of excellence, because perfection doesn't exist. In the film, which I just watched this week, Jimmy Chin, the director or co-director and phenomenal climber and photographer himself, talks about how free solo is I'm paraphrasing, but it's literally the ultimate expression of perfection, because if it's not perfect, it's the ultimate consequence. I thought it was brilliant, because it's true. Like it's almost like the moment where the clouds part and it's like perfection does exist. Yeah, because it had to be perfection when you see it, and I mean you see the micro footholds that he's on the slab, and you know having been in Yosemite, having spent time with, you know, a few pretty phenomenal climbers, including Alex, including Tommy, including Ron, you know, doing a little bit of climbing myself, watching you climb, stood at the bottom of the nose, then watching the film, it's like this whole other level of understanding. Yeah. And it's like, you know, my understanding is probably compared to the general public, relatively rounded. Obviously, I don't have the experience of being up on the wall, but, you know, really understanding it to another level. Yeah. You know, and being like, well, in fact, Tommy Caldwell says in the film is that, you know, for people that don't know the sport, they're like, oh, wow, that's pretty amazing, man. I mean, like, wow, that's amazing. And then for climbers, they're like, holy shit, I can't believe you're even contemplating doing it. That's like
death.
You know, death. It's like with the knowledge and the understanding and the experience, there's just a whole other level of wisdom that goes with it, which is like, I don't, like a lot of the film crew were like, I don't know if I can do this, because, such was the conviction that it probably, there's a massive likelihood that it can't be done.
Yeah.
And he expresses perfection in doing it.
Yeah. Well, we had a conversation with Tony Molina pre-Free Solo.
Yeah.
Was it pre-Free Solo?
Well, that would have been 2 years ago.
I don't think he'd done it at the time. Maybe he had done it.
When we saw him in November?
No, it was before that.
Well, we saw him in 2016, so it would have been before. He did it in like...
We saw him earlier last year when we were out there in the summer. So it was then. With Microsoft.
That was 2016.
What? Was it really?
2017.
2017. So in 2017 we were talking... And we were saying about everything that Alex has seen. His brain, obviously, they showed that bit about his brain in the film, right?
They show that bit about his brain, yeah, they do.
And if everything were to connect, like the level of processing that would go through his brain, he could just totally break down. Like I think that's what Tony was saying, because the level of trauma, you've been up there, and you've seen all that. It's nervy enough to be 5 meters off the ground, isn't it? Moving, let alone. Some people can't climb a ladder, and this guy's up there, seeing all of that he's seen, coupled with, and I guess this is like, I wonder when he'll reflect on all of that to date, because that's a huge full stop. He doesn't need to do anything again.
No, absolutely. I mean, but that's
because every time he does it, it has to be perfection.
Yes,
because there is no other.
Yeah. There is no other option. Well, there is. There's one other option.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there are two. It's not walking or not living, I guess.
Probably not living.
Yeah. It depends how high he climbs. Whatever he does. But I wonder if he'll do anything. Is that the... Well, we shall see what he then goes to do. But I do wonder what people then take away from watching such amazing things. Is it... I'm going to pick the one thing that I've always wanted to do, and I'm going to commit to doing that, and I'm going to create a systematic process over a number of years to just steadily follow the process and chip through. He didn't just turn up and...
No, he must be, I don't know, let's say he's 30. I mean, it's definitely like the result of a 20, 25-year practice. Yeah. But it's not just the result of a 20, 25-year practice, it's the result of everything in his life. In the film, it talks about the relationships that he's had, with his family. And, there was a saying, his mum's a French teacher, and there's a saying in French, which I can't remember, but it's essentially like, whatever, that's not good enough, you can do better. So there's a constant push to try and do better, to do better, even down to, so unfortunate, that his dad died, and that left him with insurance, which allowed him to be a dirtbag climber. His willingness to, sleep in supermarket car parks and spend 88 cents. So probably like 65 pence on dinner every night. Yeah. It's just, it's beautiful because it's so unique. Like, if anything, it just shows how unique everyone's life is. Yeah. It's not just about the outward. It's everything that's happened in your life that makes you that unique character. Yeah. And one of the culminations of that uniqueness for him is that he was able to do a perfect climb on demand. Imagine saying to Usain Bolt, okay, need a 9.84, otherwise you're dead. Yeah. And being able to do that on command, it's just, he's
phenomenal. Pretty good like that, though.
Yeah, he's probably not too far from it.
But I think, for me, that's this whole idea of reflection. Everyone's externalizing everything. They go to see these films. They watch YouTube, everything is external, but this idea of reflection that you have to go within and look back at what you've done and really take the principles of, if you took the principles of Alex Honnold climbing El Cap, it would be no different to the principles of, I think we talked about Warren Buffett, reading 6 to 8 hours every day, because that compound effect of all that information and knowledge going in over time makes him one of the richest men in the world. Yeah. Also makes Alex one of the best climbers, probably
sports person in the world.
For and ever, until someone does
I mean, it's hard to conceive. Obviously,
what do you do?
Yeah,
you just do harder and harder. But they're just these principles that you take through and really commit, and that's the really hard part.
Yeah, and that I think actually then leads on nicely to the other major thing in Ron's life, which is about passing it on. So, Alex does all this amazing stuff, like then, what has he learned to pass on?
Yeah.
Which Ron talks about. And, Ron now has Sacred Rock and he passes on. I think it's quite simple. Just the experience of being in Yosemite and what it's done to him and how it's nourished his soul and changed his life. And he provides an opportunity to young offenders that would never had the opportunity for it.
Yeah, he doesn't try and... He's not wanting to make a legion of climbers.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. There's no academy for climbing.
Yeah.
I guess there's an academy of nature, and there's your backpack. Yeah, there's some water.
He says it with a great Ron giggle, where a teacher asks him, what are you going to do to these kids? And it's like, nothing. Just let the kids be themselves.
Yeah. And I guess, Alex, that reflection...
Yeah.
So maybe this idea of reflection and rites of passage, they allow you to be yourself because you can reflect on the things that actually you want to do. Work out a way of, or putting it into a sequence, an order for actually being yourself.
Yeah.
Because Alex is, imagine him behind a desk.
Probably would be certain death.
Yeah, in a totally different way. And I think people are meant to do those things when you focus on it. So it's really interesting.
It was incredible film where just you can't wait. What can I commit to?
Yeah, well that's it. You hear all these people doing that.
I suppose that's ultimately also a reflection of yourself. What do you take from the film? For me, it was like, okay, what can I connect to? Oh, sorry, what can I commit to? Yeah, maybe that's based on my whole life and all my stories. I wonder what that is for other people, and that just becomes whatever it is in whatever people are.
But I wonder if, say, Alex has that because he's committed to it. He's found his thing and he's committed to it, and most people don't.
Yeah,
they don't want to commit. They don't really want to be the best they can be.
But I think we live in that an era of time where there's so much to do. So many choices. It's very easy to not commit.
Are there so many choices, or are there just so many distractions? And actually, there are very few choices.
Yeah, I think distraction.
There are two choices, according to Arthur. There's to choose to do something or to not to do it.
Yeah.
Any distraction is choosing not to do.
Yeah.
And really, if you want to do something and you choose, every choice you make, follows that path.
Yeah.
I feel like we get in our own way.
Yep.
And the number of excuses that turn up are massive.
Yeah, and then so then I think it goes back to connecting with nature, which is connecting with your true nature, connecting with self, connecting to your authenticity, and not being distracted by life, and trusting in the process. Which we talk about a lot now. But actually, the first person that we heard it from, well, certainly I did, was Ron in the phenomenal book that he wrote called Sacred Rock, which was his reflections on life after a lifetime of climbing.
Yeah,
everyone should write a book of reflections on their lives.
Well, I think the people that journal do.
Yeah, it's good, very good point. Yeah,
and then But as I was recording intros earlier, I was thinking about the process of. Everyone's journaling. Journaling's a big thing. It's like everyone should journal every morning. That seems to me like a ruse to sell more notebooks.
Moleskins.
Yeah, more moleskins. Everyone should be journaling. It's like, great. But what do you do with all that stuff that you've written down? Do you ever then reflect? Because the reflection isn't the writing.
Yeah.
The reflection is writing it and sitting with it.
Yeah.
And so you don't actually have to write it down. You could just...
It's an art. I think reflection is an art. And there's a couple of podcasts coming out alongside this one with Will Brown and Lindsay Matthews about reflection. Lindsay talks... I was listening to Lindsay's yesterday, and she talks about how the real gold comes after a committed practice after a period of time.
Yeah.
Whether that's a month or a year of doing it, then the gold starts to make itself aware. or you start to become aware of the gold, like the flakes, the shininess of it. Then you start to kind of dig in that direction. But it requires that commitment to it. It requires the 30-day practice, or or the year's practice. I guess it's why in that book, The Artist's Date, it's like it's a 12-week process, and it's 3 pages every morning, because it takes, it's an uphill grind to begin with. It takes a period of time of doing it to get into the flow of it.
Yeah, and then it just flows.
Yeah, it's like a natural selection process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, if you can't make it over the hurdle, then it's probably not for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people it isn't. But it's when people... It's just that... Well, I think there's only one option, and that's to commit. 100%. Like, do it. And commitment is only one thing. It's all. Yeah. It's all in. It's not, I'm committed to my, I go to the gym, but when you go, you don't do anything.
Yeah. You dick around on your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, it's like you fully commit.
Yeah.
I remember coming back from this trip and saying to someone, it's really odd. After meeting all these people, I feel so inspired, and also question, like, I can choose to be around people that want to fully commit to their process, and then feed off and feed back.
Yeah.
Like, feed on their energy and feed back my energy. Because anyone else is just like a real hindrance. That was my reflection on one of my reflections on our trip, which rang true with an idea I've heard many times. You are the sum of the 5 people you hang around with.
Mm-hmm.
So really choose them carefully, wisely. Choose everything that propels you forward. Reflection is this looking back to take it to move forward, as opposed to chasing forward, ignoring the process and just trying to
creating the perfect environment for yourself, right? Actually giving thought and consideration to every element of your environment, not being blasé about it.
Maybe creating an environment of excellence over creating a perfect environment, because lots of people do, and it's why.
Did I say perfect environment?
You said perfect environment.
Yeah, you're correct. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, I was channeling Arthur there. But
an environment of excellence, I like it,
because that allows you to fail, and it feels like Ron was in an environment of excellence.
Yeah, but exactly, and
Ron was in an environment of excellence, and so was Alex, and the culmination of that was he could hit perfection. Like, Ron had to. I guess climbing is when you make an ascent, it is perfection.
Yeah,
because you're either at the top or you're not.
Yeah.
And the consequences of Alex's ascent were just greater than anyone else's, because there'll be many people that will be able to climb that route beautifully, not slip, all of this stuff, but he just did it with kind of totally exposed to the world as a real, like, I guess, trust the process. He trusted everything. Almost the air was keeping him on. The rock was...
So interestingly, he has an abandoned attempt like a year earlier. He gets up like X amount of the mountain and decides to bail. Like, something just doesn't feel right. And so, and then like he comes back a year later and does it. Like, that in itself is a commitment,
Yeah, because how many people just push through? Like, almost seeing, I don't have to do it now, it will happen.
Yeah.
Like, he was trusting that process.
Yeah.
And probably then reflected on it, and actually that's what kept him alive. Alive.
Yeah.
Not a lime. He's not a lime. It kept him alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of climbing. It's interesting. Someone said we should feature more Ashtangis, because that seems to be more our practice at the moment. But I do feel there's something about climbing that everyone can get an amazing experience from.
Yeah.
Physical, mental. When you take it like Ron has, it becomes a spiritual thing, and that and surfing. But again, even climbing, there's no surfboard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's you and the rock, and I guess you've got shoes and chalk.
I was about to say it's the surfboard, the shoes.
Yeah, possibly. But I think
and the wax, the chalk.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think swimming, surfing, and climbing, that would be the ultimate triathlon, and running, quadathlon, which would be phenomenal, wouldn't it?
Yeah. How do you? Yeah.
I don't know how you do it, but maybe that's a weMove event coming to a country near some of you at some point.
We'll do some reflecting on it. Cool. Well, thanks for listening in and joining us.
Yeah.
And check out the Ron podcast. It's
fantastic.
certainly one of my favorite podcasts we've recorded, because it just all happens so naturally, and also one of the most inspiring people that I've met, and really treasure the time that we get with him. And I'm always looking forward to getting back to hang out and see him again.
And hopefully that'll be
soon.
a week in Tuolumne Meadows, rising with the sun.
Yeah. And doing Mathers Crest.
And doing Mathers Crest with Tony.
Oh yeah, it'd be great to meet Tony and Ron. Just record that conversation.
A meeting of minds.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks very much.
Cheers.